I'm joined now by the South African National Defence Union's National Secretary, Pikkie Greef. Good day to you. Thank you very much for coming in. There were two names mentioned in the media briefing by Jeff Radebe, the Justice Minister. He mentioned Bruce Kolwane, that he acted against diplomatic protocol, that he took it upon himself, according to this media briefing, to get the diplomatic clearance for this aeroplane so that it could land at Waterkloof Air Force Base. He mentioned another name, and that's Lieutenant Colonel C. Anderson. Do you know about the investigations around her?
Well, as far as SANDU is informed, and we must remember that SANDU has appointed legal representation for Lieutenant Colonel Anderson, the lawyer is still awaiting the Defence Force to formally inform him of when and where the formal investigation into Lieutenant Colonel Anderson's alleged conduct is going to take place. So it is rather strange that Minister Radebe already has information about Lieutenant Colonel Anderson's guilt or not, when she's not even been called to a formal investigation yet.
It's very interesting, this discussion of Waterkloof Air Force Base. The Minister took time to explain that it is not a national key point. Is that because civilian planes also sometimes land there?
Well, let me just state right from the start that the Minister's contention that it's not a national key point is rather disingenuous. If it's not an area that is protected by some kind of law, then that would mean it's just another airfield. If that is true, then obviously why is there this big hula-hoo about who gave permission and who didn't give permission? Because then it really becomes irrelevant, doesn't it? It's only once you concede that the Waterkloof Air Force Base is worthy of protection under law, such as the Defence Act and National Key Points Act, that it really becomes worth doing the investigation that Radebe says he's doing.
Speaking for the Defence Union now, we understand that when you're in the military, there is protocol, there are rules, and those rules have to be followed, because in a security situation, everyone needs to know what they're doing. The picture that we are getting is that all those rules have been flouted, that it is actually possible to get in at a military airbase, and you shouldn't actually be there. That is incredibly serious from a military security point of view, surely.
It is incredibly serious. The fact of the matter is Waterkloof is a strategic military base for South Africa, apart from just being a military base itself. Anyone who gains access to that base, be it by name dropping, which of course is a corrupt means of gaining access and permission, so to speak, to that base, is guilty of an offence, at least in terms of the Defence Act. We find it very strange from SANDU's point of view why the Minister is unable to answer journalists' question during the briefing as to whether anybody is going to be prosecuted in terms of the Gupta family. We know that the Gupta family was on that airbase on the day, and so were their guests, which would prima facie, one would think at least, make out a case for a contravention of the Defence Act.
Do you think it's a little unfair that there's investigations into Defence Force personnel and the Guptas, nothing seems to have happened around them?
Well, that is exactly the point. While government is talking about name dropping, why are they name dropping people like Lieutenant Colonel Anderson's name all over the media and besmudging her name really, and not saying anything about the people who actually caused this whole fracas to take place? One would expect at least that people should be equally treated, and I think it just again highlights what SANDU has called for from the very start, which is that government cannot investigate itself. An independent investigation is needed, and even if these ministers now tell us that these things were taking place right under their noses without them knowing, well then that is actually a tacit admission that they've lost control over their departments and their personnel.
Would you agree with our previous guest who said that we need a commission of inquiry? We need a judge appointed to look into this.
No, certainly, and this has been SANDU's call right from the start. And I think it's become more clear now. We've been vindicated for making that call. We were the first ones who made that call, if I recall correctly. A judge needs to be appointed and an independent commission of inquiry needs to be conducted. As the public, we have a right to know what measure of control the ministers have over their departments and their personnel. Were they really tricked by their own personnel? Or is it simply a case of they don't have proper control?
How does this affect morale in the Defence Force?
It affects the morale very negatively. We must now remember Lieutenant Colonel Anderson's colleagues and his subordinates are watching this whole issue unfold. That what they see is that a person being at the bottom of a command chain, following orders which on the face value of the paperwork in front of her seem legitimate, is now being victimized and really strung out in public as a party guilty of corruption. And we would want from SANDU's side to extend a word of warning to government on this issue. Serious defamation is taking place against this member of the Defence Force. We will not let it stand. We will instruct our attorneys to take legal action as far as this matter is concerned.
What would you like to see happen next? What do you think is the right next step to be taken here?
The correct step to be taken here is that government must step back. It must stop investigating itself for something that is essentially in the public interest. It must appoint a commission of inquiry and show the public that it's serious about getting down to the bottom of it and investigating everybody, right from the presidency, every department, public service department and ministry that's involved, right down to the subordinates that were involved.
Thank you very much for joining us on eNCA and sharing your views with us this afternoon. That was Pikkie Greef from the South African National Defence Union. He too says that the investigation has to be broadened to a commission of inquiry and that government cannot investigate itself.
News that moves. eNCA.com.